A while back, I decided to switch from Windows to Linux as my main desktop operating system, and there were a number of driving factors that ended up ultimately leading me to this decision, one of which was the Steam Deck coming around, so Linux was just a more viable operating system when you want to play games. Windows started coming out with their various AI features and little bits of ads here and there, and I just slowly started losing interest and trust in Windows itself. Now, Windows is still a fantastic operating system, and quite frankly, if you're comfortable with Windows, I don't think it's worth switching from Windows to Linux. But I decided to make the transition myself, and I wanted to go over one of the more complicated things, and one of the things that's more relevant to me and this channel, and that is game development and VR specifically. So I want to show you how I went about setting up all of my game development, and just in general talking about my current experience with using Linux as my main desktop operating system. Now, we'll start with, first off, how my desktop is set up. Now, if you're not familiar with Linux, it's pretty simple. I basically have, I'm using Hyprland. Hyprland is what I tend to use for most everything. It's a really fantastic option. It's a tiling window manager, and basically what it allows for me to do is have as many workspaces I can transition through. That one was Steam, by the way. That I can transition through, and I can dedicate them all to do certain tasks. For example, if I open up Visual Studio Code, that automatically opens up on my workspace 2. I know where to go to find that if I ever need to edit code. If I need to mess around with Unreal Engine, I have that automatically set to go to workspace 3. So I know where to find Unreal Engine. Firefox automatically opens on workspace 1. And I can also add in extra things as well. So like I have certain things that don't have specific workspaces that they have to open on. So like this is my file manager here. I can pull up, everything else that I have. I have quite a few things installed on here. And I still get a lot of the basic features that you would expect from a from your typical desktop operating system. Now there's a few problems with this I'll go over once we start jumping into Unreal Engine. But there's a lot of different flavors that you could play around with when it comes to not only tiling window managers, but you could basically set up a desktop system that basically acts exactly how you'd expect on Windows or Mac OS. There's options like KDE Plasma, GNOME. Both are fantastic and pretty commonly used options. I'm not particularly fond of GNOME, but Plasma is pretty good. Cinnamon is awesome. There's a lot of different variations of this. And in case it's relevant to any of you guys, I'm actually using Endeavor OS as my distro of choice. Endeavor OS is actually based off of Arch, in case you are a little more familiar with that. And the main reason I decided to go this route is Steam is the current SteamOS 3 is based off of Arch. And so to me, it just kind of seemed like a very reasonable solution to go to this platform because Steam is very clearly supporting Arch, and they have done this now. That I believe they're also supporting their package manager and all sorts of different things. But also Arch tends to be a little bit more rolling release. So I tend to get, overall, if there is a new feature that I really think will be useful, or I just want to be able to play around with, I can do that a little easier with Arch compared to running something like Debian or Fedora. Although I think Fedora might also be a wrong release. I could be wrong. I haven't played around with Fedora too much. Now, my operating system out of the way, I want to real quick talk about how we go into using Unreal Engine. Now, Unreal Engine has a couple different ways you can set it up. The simplest way is by downloading the Unreal Engine binary files. And quite frankly, if you I would probably recommend this for most people. It's the easiest solution. All you do is you look up, it's really simple. All you do is look up Unreal Engine Linux. It's most likely going to be the very first thing that comes up, Unreal Engine Linux. And you simply download Unreal Engine. You can also download Fab. I will say, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, Fab does, for the most part, work. There are a few finicky things about it, but it does, for the most part, work. Now, the alternative to this, because the binary files only go back to Unreal Engine 5.1, so if you want to use an older version for whatever reason, this will not work. But there is also another way that you can load Unreal Engine, and that is by downloading Unreal Engine from GitHub, and then once you have it downloaded, building it from source. This does work. It is a longer process, and it will result in a much larger Unreal Engine folder. So do keep that in mind if you do want to go down this route. It's very simple though. All you do is you download whatever version of Unreal Engine you want. You can even, if you really want to, you can go through the branches and find a very specific commit if you find that certain versions aren't working for you. And then all you do is you run your, I believe it's the dot slash setup, and then it's the dot slash generate project files. And you're going to want to run the sh for Linux. So you run the setup, you run the generate project files, you then get a Visual Studio Code workspace folder, and you then compile that. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. Like I said, it is a very long process, especially depending on the hardware that you're running on. I would, for most people, recommend just using the Unreal Engine binary files, because this is just going to work for you, and it's a simple download, and then you're ready to go. Now, once you have it downloaded, you'll end up with, so these are all my Unreal Engine versions. This is the most recent version. So you'll end up with a folder that looks like this. And what you want to do is you want to go into Engine, Binaries, and Linux, and you'll have a lot of things in here, but you'll want to look for something called Unreal Editor, and there's actually quite a few of these. Finding it is the problem. Here it is. It's going to be this one right here. If you're comfortable with the terminal's a little bit easier to track it down, but you simply run this and it's going to open up Unreal Engine for you. I'm going to go and quit that. Actually, this might not quit for me correctly, so I'm just going to move that to a different folder for a second. Now I want to talk about how projects work a little bit, because that's kind of the more important part when you're going to be dealing with Unreal Engine, is how are you going to interact with your project. Now, this kind of dives into VR a little bit. So this is just a very simple test project. It's based off of the base version of Unreal Engine, and this is not correct. Hold on, 5.5.3, open that one. That did not want to work. Okay. So this is kind of fighting me. So this is kind of one of the problems that I've run into with working with Unreal Engine, and that's that sometimes it doesn't find all the different Unreal Engine versions that you download. It's going to be very useful to you if you're willing to learn a little bit of C++ and how to use VS Code. Fortunately, it's very easy. If you have a project built, which you can build using that Unreal Editor, you can create a C++ project. You can then open the code workspace that gets generated with your project. And then once you have it built, it's just a matter of going over to your run debug, and you want to run test project 3 editor. Really, any of these work. I find that development tends to just work a little bit better. That tends to be the one I default to. And then you can either hit the little play button up here or F5. Now, this is kind of a good thing to learn anyways, because of the way that OpenXR and VR works. Now, OpenXR does tend to have a bit of an issue when you're going to be working with Unreal Engine. For some reason, Unreal Engine does not automatically detect that OpenXR is there. And so if you try to open it just using the uproject file, it's not going to work. You are going to get an error if you have the OpenXR plugin loaded in your project. There is technically a workaround around this if you have SteamVR running and you have your headset connected, and that's also an important thing. You need to have your headset connected and working on it. Then you won't run into any issues. You don't need to start up VS Code or anything like that. But if you launch it with VS Code, this pause button here will periodically turn into a continue button. And so you'll just have to hit that a few times while the project is being opened, and then it will all open just fine. Unreal Engine, for the most part, works pretty well. There are times where it does tend to get a little laggy. I don't know if you can tell very well right now, but it is a little laggy for me in the moment, which is kind of a bummer. But it, for the most part, works just fine. I don't usually have a lot of issues with it. I really don't know why it's so laggy. I don't know if it's the level that I'm running. What if I just switch over to the starter map real quick? It could also be I'm not using mobile and scalable like I usually am too, so it could just be some of the settings I have running with Unreal Engine. Anyways, it for the most part works fine. I'm usually not getting this amount of lag. It doesn't tend to happen a whole lot. Now, let's start here with the editor, because the editor, I think, is kind of the more important thing to worry about when you're going to be dealing with Unreal Engine. If you're using a normal desktop manager like KDE Plasma, Cinnamon, GNOME, anything else like that, Unreal Engine honestly has no issues. If you're using a tiling window manager like I am, there are periodic issues. Like I cannot rotate any asset whatsoever. Certain drag and drop functionality does not work. Now this is a little weird because I can grab things and move them around. It's really rotating and scaling for some reason do not work in the editor. Just kind of a weird thing. I can obviously rotate and modify all the values here in the details panel, so it's not that big of a deal. But then you also have the same issue in Blueprints. Blueprints has the same exact issue. So like if I were to open just the level blueprint up here, come here. If I were to open the level blueprint right up here, I kind of have the same issue. I can drag and drop things around, but if I were to, for example, try and, let me break something here for a second. If I break this, for example, I won't be able to drag and drop that node very easily. It kind of breaks after a while, which is kind of weird. It's almost like it starts detecting my drag and then it stops midway through. Another little minor gripe that I have with this is I can't really like drag the window into it very easily. I'm actually kind of surprised I was able to do it that time. So typically the easier way to manage that is to, I have a hotkey on my window that will kind of break it out of full screen mode, so I can basically tile them alongside each other. So it's a real simple fix there. The last two issues that I want to talk about is, first one is Fab. Fab is a interesting plugin. Oh, that's kind of a weird little thing too. Sometimes the drop downs don't always work. Fab is kind of a hit or miss with a lot of things. So like one of my favorite plugins, and one that I kind of need to use in order for Unreal Engine to work in a tiling window manager, I can't really install it through Fab. It actually requires a launcher. I've gotten the launcher to work once, but it wasn't able to actually install the plugin, which is kind of weird. If I were to take something, however, that is, let me, for example, open my library. I have a lot of things in my library. If I were to for example, take in a Megascan, I can, oh, I guess I can't do a Megascan. Certain assets, this one I know for a fact works. I was testing this one before. I can add this one to the project, no problem. This one has no problem. The way I kind of seem to get it is if this is an asset that will get added only to the project itself, it'll work just fine. If it's something that needs to be added to the engine as a whole, it's not going to work. Which is kind of an annoying thing. There is a tool that I've found. It's called the Epic Asset Manager. It, for the most part, works. I occasionally have issues with the authorization code if you really want to go that route. But the Epic Asset Manager will allow for me to download anything that I cannot download from Fab, which is kind of an unfortunate thing. And part of the reason why I like Blueprint Assist, I skipped over that real quickly, is because it allows for me to fix a lot of the issues that I have with using blueprints. So for example, like I said, I can't really connect these things together. Blueprint Assist actually adds in, and I don't have it loaded in this project, unfortunately, but it has a hotkey that lets me click on, a node and then highlight over another node with my cursor, and it's just the Windows key and Q, and it connects those two nodes together, and it'll also add it into a line if I need to insert it in the middle of some blueprints that I already have set up. So Blueprint Assist, if you're really going to go this route and use a tiling window manager like I am, absolute necessity. It is absolutely worth buying it and downloading it and getting that set up. It does need to be installed per project, which is kind of the only problem with using Blueprint Assist, but it is an absolute necessity in order for this to work. Now, last thing that I want to mention, and this is one that unfortunately I've not found any workaround when dealing with Linux, and that is that you cannot package for Windows whatsoever. You can package for Windows. You can package for Linux. You can package for Android. I believe I have this all set up correctly right now, but there is no packaging for Windows whatsoever. I have heard of people who managed to get it working through using Wine or using VMs and stuff like that, and I'll get into that in a second, but you cannot package for Windows. Unreal Engine, from my understanding, tends to use a lot of proprietary Windows drivers in order to function, period, at least on the Windows version, and so it's not going to allow for you to package for Windows either. If you're on Linux and you want to package for Windows, which you're most likely going to want to, you will need a second machine, or the alternative that I have come across, let me go and close this down quick, is to set up a Windows VM. This comes with a whole bunch of gripes on its own. So I actually have a Windows VM. I'll actually open up real quick Virtual Machine Manager just to show you. I have a Windows VM running. Before I launch Windows at all, I want to say this right now. There is Unreal Engine requires, this is not an option, it requires a DirectX compatible GPU in order to function. So in order for this to work, it is going to be a more expensive process, and it is going to be a little bit more difficult process to set up if you are not used to using Linux. In order for this to work, I actually have a second GPU installed in my PC, and I'll show you that it does actually show up when I open up Windows. And you will require this in order for Unreal Engine to work at all. So if I go and open up my task manager right here, I actually have, it's not under startup. Here we go. I actually have a GPU. It is entirely dedicated to this Windows virtual machine. So it works perfectly fine. I've also dedicated, of course, CPU, memory resources. It actually has two VirtIO hard drives dedicated to it, as well as Ethernet going. And just so you're aware, a good thing that I have had to set up that I would highly suggest is setting up bridge networking in order for this to work. That's not a necessity, but it is something I would recommend. Anyways, so it does require you to set up PCIe pass-through in order to run Windows. Now, if you decide to go down this route, there is no issue whatsoever with launching the Epic Games Launcher. This won't even launch, by the way, if you do not have a DirectX compatible GPU installed in your VM. It is a little bit laggy, I will say, but it does work just fine, so I can launch Unreal Engine. I've only launched it a couple times. I might actually have a project set up in here already. Oh, I actually have one that I was working on installed on here. So I can launch Unreal Engine just fine, so it just runs through a VM, and I can package projects. I've done that before as well. So this is an alternative if you don't want to have a second PC. And those are kind of the main two ways of using Unreal Engine, is to either set up a VM within your Linux operating system, or to put up with the gripes and then maybe find another way to package for Windows. If anybody happens to know another way to package for Windows without needing a VM, honestly, that would be amazing. I'd love to let you guys let me know in the comments. Another little perk is it does allow for me to run some games that have the anti-cheat and things like that. I don't know why it's asking me to download this again. I promise you, I have launched Unreal Engine in this VM before. I don't know why it's doing this. Alright, I'm really not sure why the little .NET thing popped up. I think that's popped up before. Maybe it's a bug with using the VM or something with Windows or something like that. This does have Blueprint Assist loaded in it, by the way. But it does work just fine. So like I said, this is a project that I have been working on. I have built this project. I deleted the build files because it was really early on in development. But this does work just fine. And I've not had any issues with using the VM version. I think going forward, when I do tutorials and guides, I'm probably going to end up doing it here in this Windows VM, just because, and part of that also has to do with the fact that I'm sure a lot of you guys are using Windows anyways. So it's just going to be a much easier one-to-one transition, and you won't have to see the weirdness that I have to do when I'm dealing with Linux or anything like that. But yeah, everything works just fine. I have not had any issues with using the Windows VM or anything. Like, I can still, if I want to drop in a print string, drag this over. And this is using Moonlight and Sunshine, so it's not the best setup. And this is part of the reason I believe I actually had to set the bridge networking just in order for Moonlight and Sunshine to work. Yeah, I mean, this all works just fine. No finickiness or anything like that. And this is probably going forward how I'm going to end up getting assets, access to my assets that I use in Unreal Engine. I'm probably going to have like a project that I can just pull the plugins from and import into Linux for personal projects. But I mean, this all works just fine. I can manage everything just fine. Same thing goes for Steam. I haven't played around too much with this, but I can. I do have SteamVR installed on here, so if I go and pull up SteamVR, along with all my other games that I have going on, I can launch SteamVR. And one of the nice things that SteamVR has recently come out with is you can actually stream SteamVR to your Quest 2 or Quest 3. I'm currently still running a Quest 2. I have not yet upgraded to a Quest 3. I've been meaning to for some time and just have not done that. But because I have bridge networking set up and everything, I can fortunately run SteamVR through this, and I don't have any issues with OpenXR like I do on the Linux side. So it all just works without question whatsoever. Now, like I said, Unreal Engine still works pretty great on Linux. It does definitely have its problems, and one of the big ones that I still haven't quite figured out is how do you package for Windows on Linux if you don't have a VM. That's something that, quite frankly, I haven't found an issue for. Something I did forget to bring up, by the way, Quest 2 and Quest 3, they do work just fine on Linux. There is one issue with audio. If you're going to go that route, you do require ALVR. That is the only method that I found for streaming your SteamVR to your Quest 2 or Quest 3 on Linux. ALVR, though, however, works great. The only issue I've had with it is that audio does not pass through very well. And for that, I actually do have, it's actually sitting over here charging, Bluetooth headphones. It's a simple solution, but it works just fine, and quite frankly, I think it gives me slightly better audio than I get out of my own Quest 2 anyways. While I would prefer to have an all-in-one solution, just plug in my headphones or whatever, it unfortunately just doesn't work quite that simply when you're doing VR. So if you're comfortable with using Windows, quite frankly, I wouldn't suggest following my same setup. And a lot of my future guides and tutorials, you're probably going to see me using the Windows VM a lot anyways, just so it's a little more easier for you guys to follow as well. But for me, because I've gotten so comfortable with using Linux, and it provides me with a lot of the features that I really like, and removes a lot of the features that I really don't want, then to me, Linux is a really awesome operating system. And if you really want to go down this route, well, I wish you guys the best of luck. With that, I hope you guys like seeing this quick little preview into how I use Unreal Engine on Linux. If you guys have any more specific questions or would like to see a guide on anything you guys saw in this video, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to see if you guys found anything interesting in this video whatsoever. And with that, I'll see you in the next reality.